take on a blocker. I would run head on into the blocker. I would drop my head and put it right under the face mask of the lineman so that their head snapped back. So I hit them right under their chin, and their head would snap back. That's the stun part. And then I'd put my arms in there, press my arms in there to get separation. So stun them with the butt of my forehead, separate, throw them, and go make the tackle. Stun and separate. But I always use the butt of my forehead as the weapon initially to take on the blocker. That caused me a lot of problems because as good as I was at that technique, I started to get concussed a lot, getting my bell rung or getting dinged by using the butt of my forehead. So although it was a very good technique and weapon for me, it probably is the reason I had issues later on. So. I really started paying close attention to concussions is when I got two back-to-back. I got two concussions within a 4-day period that I knew something had changed with me. And so the acute symptoms were just very severe. I could see changes in my personality. Just sleep, anxiety, depression, impulse issues. And so it was something that I couldn't ignore anymore. But the problem was when I was having these issues, this was before we knew what we knew now.
So chronic traumatic encephalopathy is the main precursor to it is repetitive head impacts, which occur in football. So the more like the head is exposed to trauma, like during football, it's actually a recent study from Dr. Jesse Mez that came out. Like any form of football, any form of level, professional, high school, anything, with each year that you play football, you have an increased chance by 30% to develop CTE.
Based on the clinical symptoms, there's changes in cognition. So, memory, being impulsive, and there's also changes in behavior, and that includes, being more aggressive, hostile, and then the cognition part, there's memory, which is impacted severely. So some people don't remember anything, some people forget some stuff. There's also development of motor symptoms, which are more supportive features. So the thing is that it's different for different people. So there are different variants. So some people might be depressed, have anxiety. So that's the behavior/mood variant.
Our team over here at BU and Jamaica Plain and Bedford are the two VA centers. It's composed of a clinical team and a pathology team. Our Saul, who you just spoke to, is on the clinical team as a clinical RA. He coordinates with the family who, if their loved one might be passing soon and they hear about that they can develop or they can donate their brain, they'll reach out to the clinical team and they'll set all that stuff up. A courier will pick up the brain, and then I or another member on our team will find out that a brain is getting donated, and we'll prep the lab, go receive the brain, and then we'll process it, which includes cutting it into coronals, fixing one half, which is later blocked, where the slides are then reviewed by the neuropathologist to give a definitive diagnosis to the families.
A lot more NFL players, after Dr. Mez's article where they found that, 110 out of 111 NFL players had CTE, that was kind of, in 2017, that was kind of the big reason why people started talking about it more, and more sports writers and other writers and journalists began to talk about concussions. What does that mean?
Sure, media has just a tremendous reach, and doctors are constantly pumping out studies and information, and that information is out there, but people don't really access that. I mean, nobody has really been trained on how to read a study, and the amount of people who are going out seeking this medical information is a lot of doctors talking to doctors. I mean, since when I was a kid watching sports, it wasn't talked about at all. I mean, I didn't ever see anyone talk about the seriousness of a concussion. It was almost like, wow, that guy's on the ground. Look at the funny face he's making. The jacked up era, if you will. Those days are, for the most part, over, but now I think it's just this, we know this is serious, but how do we talk about it? What's the specific things that we can say in these moments? And I think that's where the Media Project comes in, is trying to give those tools of when this happens, you're prepared for it because you've done your research on what concussion protocol is. If concussion protocol is not followed, what are the implications of that? Those types of things are what we're not hearing on broadcast now. There's two really big errors. There's one on the print side that I see more often, and then there's one on the broadcast side. The print side is this consistent use of head injury instead of when we're talking about concussion. And that's fine. You can talk about a head injury when it's a head injury and there's an impact to the head. But when we're talking about a concussion, a functional injury that changes how someone behaves, thinks, and feels, that is a brain injury. And on the live broadcast side, I think it's silence, honestly. It's the lack of filling that air when someone's down on the field with information.
You can see taking a little extra time.
But listen, what we have known about this young man.
Hopefully with the Media Project down the road, with student journalists becoming people in this field and also the working journalists we work with, that information gets more and more out there.
That article kind of forced the NFL to stop ignoring, I think, what was going on. And so it brought to light a lot of things that were being swept under the rug. I mean, concussions in a way of, almost like destroyed my life because what was happening was I didn't like the way I was feeling. My brain wasn't firing on all cylinders. I wasn't functioning cognitively on a high level like I used to. And so I looked for answers. And so I looked for drugs to help with that, which I thought were helping. And so it led to an addiction in drugs. And so that decision it's been led to some heartache, some very difficult times in the last 15 years since I've retired. Just the drug use that was started because of the way I felt, the way my head felt. So this is personal to me, very personal. And so I take it that way. And so when I have a chance to talk and educate people on the dangers of it, I would take that opportunity to do that because it's a very serious thing. And there's a lot of guys like me that just have too much pride and don't want to ask for help. And so if they hear me talking about it, maybe it gives them the strength to go say something to somebody, because there's a lot of very well-known players that you never hear from again because they're too embarrassed to ask for help, and that just isn't right to me. So I think the biggest impact is that there's concussion protocol now. There's independent spotters that are looking for guys who are concussed. So there's a lot of new things that they've implemented that I think help. But the biggest thing is you're not hitting as much in practice, and I think that's going to cut down on the concussion. So I think overall the game is safer. At least players, I think, are more protected than they ever have been than certainly when I was playing.